Morning, Hamish. Morning to all of our lovely national readers as well. I'm Laura Webster, the National's News and Features Editor, and I'm joined by Hamish Morrison, our fantastic political reporter. We're just here to give you a quick rundown of today's stories and what's coming up later in the day. How are you doing today, Hamish?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. Pretty good. I think it's going to be quite a busy day today. I think there's a lot on. We're back to full business in both parliaments now. So we're after the local elections and the Queen's speech. So yeah, a lot on today.
Yeah, and it's already been kind of an interesting day. We started off with Michael Gove trending on Twitter. Can you tell me why that was?
I think there was quite a lot of speculation about what Michael Gove had for his breakfast this morning. I'm not sure if it was Weetabix. He he got two. You can look it up yourself. We're not going to necessarily get into it, but he got some interesting words trending on Twitter this morning with quite a bizarre performance where he affected I think it was variously a Scouse accent, an American accent, and then some other kind of funky one where he was rejecting calls for an emergency budget to tackle the cost of living crisis that I heard on the radio this morning is going to plunge millions of people into poverty. So he's clearly taking it very seriously. He's definitely up on, tackling it head on with funny voices and Scouse accents. So should we all feel very secure in his hands this morning?
Yeah, it was extremely bizarre from what I saw. So yesterday we had the Queen's speech, and there was absolutely nothing introduced in that speech to sort of provide for the cost of living crisis or to try and tackle the suffering that's going on. And Michael Gove was on this morning sort of rebutting against speculation that there might be an emergency budget to sort of introduce those bills that you might have expected to come in as part of the Queen's speech yesterday. But he was so determined to tell people that actually, no, we're not doing anything to help anybody. And I think that's why he was so wound up. He's like, yeah, no, we're not going to do it. Don't worry, all my friends in the business community, we're looking out for you. There's no windfall tax coming. Everything's fine. So yeah, that just leads us on from the Queen's speech. But what else was in there yesterday, Hamish?
So there was about 27 bills that affect Scotland, and some of them are kind of. I mean, like you say, there's not a lot of like things that you would necessarily expect to see when we're facing like the biggest fall of living standards, and I think it's something like 60 years.
On record, I believe.
There's a trade bill with Australia and New Zealand for making up for the fact that we left an organisation that had a trade arrangement with both of those countries. There is a national security bill, which I think people have raised quite serious concerns that it allows public bodies to take actions against whistleblowers, which people say is going to be a threat to people's freedom of speech. On the other hand, they're going to enforce freedom of speech laws or make them for higher education institutions. So that's an interesting one where if you don't host somebody who holds offensive views at a university event, then you are more protected now in the law than somebody who performs public interest whistleblowing against organisations. Get your head around that one. Again, nothing on the cost of living crisis. Animal welfare is in there. Nadine Dorries' bill to make Britain's internet the safest internet in the world, the same internet as everywhere else. So that's just going to make. I think that's the talk about that sort of getting rid of anonymous accounts on social media and stuff like that, and putting a duty of care on like websites so that they're more responsible for the content posted there. But that's quite an enormous challenge when you're pitting the UK government against tech giants like Twitter, Google, and Facebook and things like that. I'm not totally clear on how they're going to get through that. And then there's planning, which I actually heard on the radio this morning, is going to make planning decisions in England be decided by a vote, like a local vote, which I think is just a hilarious idea. It's just like a setup to to street wars, isn't it? Over people's extensions. You can see, like, literally cannot see a way of that ending without bloodshed over somebody's conservatory. But there you go. They obviously thought it was a good idea. But yeah, you were covering the Queen's speech as it happened yesterday, Laura. Was there anything exciting?
Honestly, in terms of the legislation, no. I mean, most of it we knew about already. I think what's quite interesting today is there's been a lot of discussion in the German media about this Brexit Freedoms Bill. As much as it pains me to say Brexit Freedoms Bill, that's ridiculous. What are the Brexit freedoms? Please tell us. We'd love to know. The German media is pointing out that it will potentially breach international law, I believe, and we have a few journalists having a look into that today. It is really interesting that the European media is much quicker to point out these stories and these kind of failings and incompetence from the UK government than our own media here in the UK is. The other interesting things from the Queen's speech, again, not the legislation at all, was during the debate afterwards, Hannah Bardell, who's the SNP MP for Livingston, she stood up during Ian Blackford's speech to basically call out people like Andrew Bowie and the other Scottish Tories for saying that there shouldn't be another independence referendum. And in her language, I think she said that the UK government, something, shower of criminal... so there's the quote on the screen just there. So she called them criminals. She didn't necessarily point anybody out as a criminal, but Lindsay Hoyle, the speaker, really wasn't very pleased with this. David Davis had stood up to say that's against the rules. You're not allowed to call somebody a criminal. And that's true in the House of Commons, just as you're not allowed to say you're a liar. You're also not allowed to call somebody a criminal. Even though it is factual in this case, there are criminals in the UK government running the country. As we all know, they have been fined and potentially more fines on the way. Now the local elections are out the way. I believe the Met Police might start issuing those fines again. But yeah, there was quite a lot of backlash on social media to people pointing out, well, why can't Hannah Bardell point out that there are criminals in the government? That's just telling the truth. You get into trouble for telling the truth, but you don't get into trouble for being a liar in the House of Commons. And that's just the way it's structured.
Yeah.
The other thing we did a short story on last night was, I mean, how many times have I written stories, or you've written stories about Tory MPs being really quite disrespectful to SNP MPs in the Commons? But last night, Ian Blackford finished his speech, and I could hear, I believe, a Tory frontbencher, still unnamed, still don't know who they are, been asking around, still not sure, but the microphone picked him up saying, "Thank God for that," in a really kind of sneering, snarky tone. So we did.
At least they stuck about for it, though. Most of them had walked out at the start when Ian Blackford got up to speak. So
that's standard. That's standard. And Sky News stopped covering it as well. Sorry, Hamish, go ahead.
No, I'm saying at least one of them hung about for it to hear
it. There wasn't many of them.
Yeah.
It is disappointing. They should be sticking around to at least listen to what people have to say. Of course, for the main party leaders, at least it would be respectful for the frontbenchers to remain in place and listen to them, and that would include the Greens and the Lib Dems as well. And to be honest, I can understand to an extent. There was some really weird, like, best man type speeches at the start of yesterday's Queen's speech debate. I had no idea what was going on. I was like, is this a wedding reception? These Tories were standing up and effectively giving like roasts and these bizarre speeches, and they were all hysterically laughing at it. So I mean, I would be trying to run away from that as quick as possible as well. So I can get my head around that element at least.
You can really see why it drives some people to drink. I mean, that just seems like the least funny teacher that taught you at school trying to crack jokes. But there you go. Yeah, and then is there any other sort of big stories today, Laura? I know you were talking about the Al Jazeera journalist that was killed in Palestine as well.
Yes, so there's still information coming out about that, but it looks like she was killed in Israeli fire during a raid in the city of Jenin, and I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. It looks like the Israeli military is going to open an investigation into it, but they're maybe not being particularly forthcoming right now as to what's happened. They had been suggested that there had been some firing from militants in the area, but there's footage going around on social media that suggests that's not the case. Of course, because these are broadcast journalists, there's a lot of footage to show what happened. I'm not advocating people seeking that out. It's obviously incredibly traumatic footage to watch, but that is circulating on social media. And of course, it's not the first time that Al Jazeera have been damaged by Israeli fire. This was last year, roughly this time last year, the Al Jazeera headquarters in, was it Gaza or the West Bank? I'm not certain, but it was hit by fire from Israeli missile and it completely collapsed. Thankfully, nobody was injured in that, but not a great moment for the freedom of the press.
Yeah, incredibly dangerous work that they do, but really necessary as well. And I think we've also got quite a busy day in Holyrood as well. We've got quite a lot of stuff on crime today, with the Tories saying that violent crime is up and the SNP saying that Scotland is the safest it's been in over a decade. So that's quite an interesting debate. And also they're talking about the numbers of police and sort of community safety as well. And there's two actually Scottish Tory debates in Parliament today. There's also one about problems with ferry contracts as well, which I'm sure will be very interesting. I mean, I know that we reported a couple of weeks ago the GMB organiser for the yard, Ferguson's yard in Port Glasgow, saying that the Labour Party were risking jobs by politicising the issue so heavily. So it's interesting to sort of see how questions can be answered on this without resorting to these sort of cheap political attacks, which I think was the sort of thrust of the GMB's letter from a couple of weeks ago to directly to Anna Sarwar, actually calling them out for basically kind of political point scoring without necessarily getting fully behind the workers at the yard as well. So I think it's like very delicate, but it's very interesting as well to see how that will come off. So it's a busy day.
Absolutely. And I mean, that is an interesting point about the ferries story as well, is that whenever you do hear about it, whether that's on the BBC or in much of the Scottish print media, the voices of the people expressing the concerns tend to be political party leaders. We're not often hearing from people directly affected who are working in the yards. So I can completely understand where the GMB are coming from on that. Another story that's on our front page this morning is the Progress to Yes conference is going to be taking place in Aberdeen later this month. And this is sort of being touted as the start of the 2023 independence campaign. And I'm not biased or anything, but I am speaking at it. So I'm sure everyone will want to get those tickets and come up to Aberdeen for the end of the month. It's going to be a really, really good event. There's lots of fantastic speakers. We've got Mike Russell, obviously the SNP president. That's off the top of my head. I know Amar Anwar is speaking, and I'll be joining Young Voices of the Media panel. Alistair Heather, the Scots language expert. So there's going to definitely be a little bit of everything going on there. And I'm really excited. I'm really looking forward to it. You'll also be able to catch our editor, Callum Baird, our deputy editor, Stuart Ward, and one of our other political reporters, Abby Yarton Crosby, who will be hosting a workshop on the media in Scotland. So I think that will be really, really interesting.
And can you get tickets for it? What's the situation with getting tickets for it?
Yeah, so if you read the story online on the national.scot, there'll be instructions on how to grab tickets. I believe it's selling out really, really quickly, so there might not be a whole ton of them left. But based on the lineup alone, I can see why that's happening. It's going to be a really exciting event, and it's going to be so good to bring everybody together again in the independence movement, especially after 2+ years of all spread out across the country and not being able to do these kind of proper campaigning activities. I think it'll be great. Can't wait.
Brilliant. Great. Well, does that cover us for today?
I think so. I think that's us. We've put the world to rights.
Great. Finish for
Great.
the day.
Well, yeah, thank you.